And you are live.
Great. This is Senate Transportation. It's still Wednesday, January 24th. We're back with our third issue of the day. Today we're talking about the Vermont State Plane Coordinating System and some changes that need to be made. So we'll just turn it over to our witnesses. You can introduce yourselves and give us the presentation.
Great. I'll start just by saying hello. I'm John Adams, Director of the Center for Geographic Information, and also introduce Tim Turway, who's been our lead on this issue, S154, which is preparing Vermont for some changes being implemented by our federal partners at the National Geodetic Survey, which Dan Martin is our advisor, and I will mostly just hand things over to Dan. But before doing that, I guess I'll just mention that Dan and his team have been working on this for over 15 years and have done a great job of reaching out and presenting at least annually updates on what is happening. So this shouldn't be a surprise to most people that are impacted by these changes. We know it's coming.
Just not being confrontational at all about it. Just as far as for anybody watching or even myself, and I'd asked the question before and I thought I had it answered. Why do we have to have something as far as why do we have to take action? Why can't you guys just do it and just say, okay, here you go, boom, done?
Matter of the law.
That in effect, this is a little bit what we're trying to do in the wording of this bill is phrase it in a way that then just refers to the NGS standards so that we don't have to come back here the next time there is, or if there is a change. So that is, I think, what this bill is trying to do.
Yeah, it's been in Vermont statutes since for a long time with the original coordinate system and then the follow-up coordinate system and now this one, yeah. So hopefully this one will make updates painless.
But we actually got some testimony that having that statutory history was beneficial with when
it is absolutely yeah.
And so even though you could have, we gave you the language that allows you to just automatically update. The drawback was then you don't have necessarily that statutory reference, historical reference that can make a difference for surveyors and boundary disputes, etc. So that was, so we have this discussion all the time. How much should we put in statute, recognizing things change and coming back? But that was, so maybe you can speak to that as well in terms of the proposed language versus that piece of testimony that we have.
From our perspective,
you don't care probably.
Well, no, it's not quite, but we drafted some model language to help the states with this change, recognizing that it's sometimes an arduous process to go through. Maybe not so much in Vermont, but other states can be very difficult to get on the agenda, to get these things changed, and wanted to try to make it as easy for folks in the future to do that. So that was why we suggested that, and I think most people kind of saw the benefit of that, and I think maybe that's what Vermont did. Let John speak to that. But
we adopted, their work from their template and Ledge Council into sort of bringing those two together, and that's how we ended up with this bill.
But lastly, our relationships with practitioners and their professional bodies is usually one of keeping them abreast of changes as they occur. And that as an alternative presumably could fit for, rather than referring directly to statute for those changes, but rather here's a note directly related to the groups that you interact with, whether it's surveyors, engineers, etc.
So you're saying that there is a historical reference, it just doesn't have to be via a statutory change.
It's one more incentive for us to be in regular communication with the users on changes.
You probably need to put yourself on record.
What's your name?
Tim Turway, Vermont Center for Geographic Information. Work with John on the creation of this.
Are you leaving us?
Just trying to create sort of blocking the door.
So I along with what he said, I think that historical record will then, instead of it being in your statutes, one could refer to when the National Geodetic Survey changed their system. because this is set up to adopt whatever the National Geodetic Survey has enacted for the
So there
country.
is that. Well, that would argue then for the automatic alignment out into the future. For anybody who's sitting around this table in about 40 years. I mean, when was the last time this was
We're
done?
trying to get to 2038.
1990, yeah.
19,
Last system is 83, but it's been revised later.
Yeah, I mean, the original 83 statute was in, I think, 1990.
Okay, well, we might have more questions, but we'll let you go through your presentation.
We're pretty good about getting you off topic, so just like.
There you go. So just a little bit of background. I'm one of 14 advisors through the country for my agency. So again, this is a nationwide push. It's nothing specifically about Vermont. It's the entire nation. My agency, this is our mission. So we establish, maintain, provide access to the coordinate systems for the United States, both horizontal and vertical. So that's our agency. That's why we're involved in this process. And how these change with time. So we have acknowledged in our newest coordinate systems or our newest datums that will be coming out that the Earth, as much as we like to think it doesn't move and it's static, the reality is it does move. I've got a couple of slides that actually highlight that. Directly, these are our customers. This is who National Geodetic Survey directly supports. That's our federal partners. But as a trickle down, that means anybody who's working within the states, doing work for federal partners, doing contracts. Obviously, we're very involved with local governments, state governments, and private practitioners as well.
And so and then you just tell me if you have a slide on this, but when we're talking about like at the Vermont level, these practitioners or the people that would be impacted, will you tell us who that is?
I have an example of some of those, sure, yep.
so you're part of NOAA, then, is that correct? You
We
said
are, yep,
NOAA.
yeah, Department of Commerce, NOAA, National Ocean Service, National Geodetic Survey. So we're a very small cog in the wheel.
What is a datum as opposed to what are data?
So a datum, a datum is a set of constants, coordinates that allow people to work on the same system. So I can do a map in my backyard, you can do one in your backyard, and we can relate the two, right? So if I do my own map and you do your own map and we don't have anything in common, then they stand alone and they don't relate to each other. So a datum allows us to share information, like in a geographic information system, or LiDAR or anything else that's collected allows me to collect information and share it with other people and they can utilize it. So that's really kind of what my agency does, is establish these datums. Oh, this is not the updated one.
Yeah, these slides are not matching up.
Yeah, this is, where's that updated one?
Probably in the downloads folder.
It's on our website.
We have it, yeah.
Yeah, we have
You
it.
have it.
Yeah.
So basically what I did was
Oh, here it is now.
we moved this slide to, yeah, we combined two slides there. So I'll just keep moving through. Sorry about that.
Use datum.
So the purpose of it, and I kind of described what the reason for that was. Okay. And again, it's used in construction. So VTrans very heavily uses the datums for their highway projects. Same thing with Agency Natural Resources and others. And again, this was shortened up quite a bit. This is just to show that we have progressed and improved our systems throughout the years, going back to an early version, which is the North American datum of 1986, and then, I'm sorry, 27, then NAD 83, 86, North American datum of 1986. Finally, what we're proposing now, or what we will be putting out next year, which is the North American terrestrial reference frame of 2022. And that's the one that's replacing the North American datum of 1983. So traditionally, this was a horizontal datum. So it was based on some physical point on the ground. We do astronomical observations and establish mapping from there, right? So it started at this place in Kansas for 27, and we propagated the information throughout the entire country. But more
when we see those, I don't know what you call those medallions.
They'd either be a horizontal control station or a benchmark sometimes.
Are those visible only when you're on the ground, or do you actually somehow connect to those?
They're the only way to connect to them is to physically go touch it. Yep, walk out and touch it. And that's how you attach to the datum, by physically observing that mark.
There are thousands of those?
Oh, millions. Well, a million, let's say, across the country, yes. Some have latitude and longitude on them, some have heights on them, some have both.
Right. And are you still putting those in the ground?
We do not anymore.
Yeah.
The reason being is that we've moved much to use of GPS and other remote sensing techniques. And so the need to physically put a mark on the ground is diminished by quite a bit, because I can establish a point very quickly and easily anywhere. So with our new datums, our modern datums, it's not a point on the ground. It's actually kind of the Earth's center of gravity. That's the 0 point, the 000 for our coordinate system. The reason is because we're getting our coordinates from space. It's space-based. And
So what happened to that place in Kansas?
it's still there. It is still there.
But you don't use it?
No, I mean, it's old technology, if you will.
Oh, 1927, yeah.
Well, it was established quite a bit before that, but yeah, that was the earliest datum.
I think the thing that impressed me the most as far as studying for real estate was going back and looking back how far all of this really took place.
It goes back to the 1700s.
It's unbelievable
Yeah.
that it was that far thought out and pretty impressive.
My initial agency, we were formed in 1807. Oldest scientific agency in the United States. So in the modern world of geodesy and surveying, it's the Earth's center. Okay. So one of the problems that we have with our current NAD83, which is one of the reasons why we're putting in the new system, is that NAD83, our understanding of the Earth's center when we published it in 1986, was in one place. And over time, we've gotten a much, much better understanding of where that actual center is. And so today, those two diverge by a little over 2 meters. Right? So one of the improvements that we're making in the datum itself, not necessarily the Vermont coordinate system, but what the coordinate system is based on, is that we're putting that origin really kind of where it's supposed to be.
Where is that?
Somewhere way down there.
Not in Kansas.
Somewhere way down there. I mean, it's roughly, really, if you think about it, it's that point in which all of the Earth's satellites would revolve around.
Well, this
so-
is certainly a departure from our usual.
Right, it's a good day of budgets, the car seats.
Oh my
But
God.
where is the
That's right.
center of the earth?
Where's Waldo? All right.
So the reasons we're making this, one is our current datum is not as geocentric as it should be. It's not exactly where it should be, so we have the opportunity to update it. The other point is that it's not well defined with the motions that we know that take place. Right? Earthquakes, whether that be a slow slipping or whether it be a very sudden. Right, the sudden's easy to deal with because you know it moved and you can go out and do resurveys, etc. That very slow motion is a lot harder to determine. We have something here, which I have a slide that shows it here in northeastern Vermont called GIA or glacial isostatic adjustment. So we had a mile of ice on top of us 15,000 years ago. I don't know when that event was, and that compressed the Earth's crust, and then that ice melted, and the Earth is rebounding. Okay, maybe a 0.5 millimeter a year, but 0.5 millimeter a year over 50 years is a real number, right? So it's something that we have the ability to build into our system and take that into account. And then there's other places, around. Everybody knows about the subsidence down in Louisiana and areas where the Earth is sinking, right, for various different reasons.
Like Venice?
Interplate motions.
Like Venice, sure.
Interplate motions of what we used to call platonic.
Well, I mean, well, we have tectonic shifts, right, of the shifts, but even within our stable North American plate, there are intraplate motions. Okay, so things are happening within the plate that are not necessarily along the plate boundaries. So this is what the velocity of the North American plate looks like. Okay? So these are all permanently operating GPS reference stations, and we can look at that and say that from this, and let's I mean, but the one thing that you'll notice, right? California does not behave the way the rest of the country does. The reason is because Western California is on the Pacific plate, right? So creating a North American plate model does not help California, right? We have to do something different. So I just wanted to point that out.
I have a question.
Mhm.
The work you do,
Mhm.
and obviously we have a border with Canada.
Yes.
Is there something comparable that you coordinate with?
We work very closely with our international
I
partners.
think there would have to be.
Yeah, matter of fact, on this newest update, the Canadians, we are working with the Canadians directly. We're adopting common things that both countries will utilize. It will make working across the borders much easier.
Yeah.
Mhm. So this just zooming into the Northeast. So you can see, horizontally, we're looking at, the Earth, the North American plate's moving at, let's say, 1.5 centimeters per year. Okay? And you can see in the color ramping,
So we're moving
that vertical motion, let's say up in the northeastern part of Vermont, right, which means that there's a little bit of uplift, by, let's say, 0.5 millimeter or so.
And this is are these arrows all the same length?
Approximately. This is pretty much the motion of the North American plate. Right.
And the color, the heat map part of that?
The heat mark is a vertical motion. Okay, so you can see that there's that uplift, let's say up in the the northeast part of the state.
The kingdom's getting higher.
Yeah, we got one of those dispensaries.
There you go. Island Ponds always have.
Oh,
it.
And we've got that midpoint between the equator and the North Pole.
Yeah.
So now if we go and now let's go from a international model where we can see the places are moving. Let's go to our current and North American data in 1983 and say, let's stabilize North America. Okay, let's make it a static coordinate system. As you can see, it's greatly improved, right? But there's still some residual motions that our models can't eliminate completely. Okay? So those motions within our current system go unmitigated. They continue to exist, and vertically, NAD83 really has no ability to deal with the vertical changes. So as you can see, that remains unchanged. So it's still, that uplift is still taking place.
Is it fair to say that the reason why it's darker, the ice was there, so
Yeah.
that's what it is?
Sure. I mean, take your finger, push down on a sponge.
Right.
Take your finger off, what happens?
Right.
It comes back up.
And
And
the ice was there, has melted in less time, or it was here longer ago, and it was deeper there longer. And so that is still raising faster because this is already raised.
yes, we were closer to the edge of the ice sheet than let's say Canada or northern Canada.
That kind of makes it look like Rutland's trying to get to New Hampshire.
Yeah. Okay, so I mentioned the plates, and again, this is just for your information, just to kind of see how it all ties together. So from a national standpoint, we have to do things in the Pacific and Northern Marianas and the Caribbean because we have federal U.S. territories there that we have to assist. So this is not just the North American plate in California. It's the Caribbean, the U.S. Virgin Islands, Puerto Rico, Marianas, Guam, anywhere that we have an interest. Okay, so the 4 tectonic plates that we make models for. So currently, this is what we deal with on the NAD83 side, and very similar on the new frame, but we've added a Caribbean frame because Caribbean frame is a separate thing. So for us here in Vermont, it's the North American Terrestrial Reference Frame of 2022. That's the new official name that replaces the North American data of 1983. So now let's get to the real reason that we're here is to talk about what is a state plane coordinate system. So you can read what I have up here, but I'll shorten that up in saying that a state plane coordinate system is a way to take a round Earth and put it on a flat piece of paper. Okay, there's a bunch of different ways of doing that. but it allows you to make measurements and then project that onto a flat plane so that you can put it on a paper, right? Otherwise, you'd be having to be working latitudes and longitudes, and ask any surveyor, they don't like doing that, right? The math is a lot more complicated than using XY coordinates in either feet or meters. This is the state plane coordinate system as it exists today. Some states are large enough that they have multiple zones. Vermont is a smaller state, has only one zone.
So there's New Hampshire.
And so there's New Hampshire, Massachusetts. Actually, Massachusetts currently has two. They have one for the islands. But again, it's a matter of building a zone that keeps, as we'll see, something called distortion, right? I mean, if I measure a distance on a rounded surface and then I flatten it out, those two distances are different. Okay, and so for a surveyor, they measure on the surface of the earth, and then they put it onto a flat plane reference to our ellipsoid, and the distances are different. And so that's something called distortion. It's mathematically taken care of, but it can be a pain in the neck. You know, when you're plotting things on a GIS, and then you want to know the distance between those two. Well, the distance that you're scaling is not the same as what someone would measure on the ground. So it's
in Montana, Nebraska, entire state. I mean, those are big around it.
Yep.
Oh.
Yeah, and again, this was left up to the states to decide how they wanted to do it.
Oh.
Okay, so NGS does not mandate really anything. We may recommend, but ultimately a state can pretty much do what they want as far as their coordinate systems go. And let's see. Okay, so the new state plane coordinate system, we have these things called projections, and there's different mathematical projections. Lambert-Connick, a state that's long east-west, uses that projection. A transverse Mercator, as what Vermont uses, is a state that's kind of elongated north-south. And then we have places, let's say, like the Florida Peninsula, right, which is on a skew, and we can use something called an oblique Mercator. So these are the different types of projections. Vermont's a transverse Mercator, and I think that's in the legislation that defines it as a transverse Mercator. So this is kind of, that's an example of what you're looking at when you're looking at those different distances. So you've got a distance that's on the grid. That's the state plane coordinate, state plane grid distance. And then you have that reference ellipsoid that we mathematically reference things to. And then you have the ground surface where people actually do measurements. And you can see in this cartoon, it's exaggerated, but those distances are different. And depending on where you are in that projection, you can be either measuring longer than what you get on the grid or measuring shorter than what you would get on the grid. So again, this is just an idea of what those distortions are. So with our new system, we've come up with an approach that minimizes distortions at ground elevation where people work. So essentially what we've done is we've, for lack of a better term, we've elevated our grid to approximate Earth elevations in the area that we're developing that grid. Okay? And so you can see now that those distances are much more similar. In addition to that, if we change the axis location, okay, we can actually kind of tilt that grid, and we can sort of approximate it not just to a point or an average of those elevations, but we can actually come very close in a lot of places, especially in a town or a state that doesn't have a lot of relief, right? We can actually put that so that you have many places where the grid distance and the ground distance would be equal. So that's the approach that we're taking with this new state plane coordinate system. It's an advantage. It makes it much easier for the surveying community, the engineering community, the GIS community to represent those distances, and for everybody to understand what's taking place. And in many cases, they can ignore the differences between the two without creating any significant problems. I'm just going to pass through that.
Which committee member wants to report this bill?
Good question. Well, we have to vote on it first before we get to that. Yeah.
Right, and some will say, well, this is a whole bunch of math and gobbledygook, but it has real meaning, right? I mean, if we can't accurately locate things, it has some consequences. For our agency, a personal story. We were doing a large project in Iowa, And we had a crew out there setting survey marks, and they had an auger that they were, augering a hole that they were going to fill with concrete. They had their version of DigSafe come out and do locates for everything. They stayed well away from what was located, right through a high pressure gas line. Not a good day, right? But that was just because that line wasn't adequately located, right? The coordinates for where it was supposed to be were incorrect. So there's real consequences to not knowing very well where things are, and that's what this new system helps to improve, even over the old system. Whoops. The information is everywhere, and the usefulness of it diminishes if we don't know where it is, and then that's really what our systems are there to help the public and the states fix. Oops. So who's affected by this? Pretty much anybody who is using or updating or creating spatial data. Utility companies, surveyors, engineers, GIS professionals. There's a host of, even for permits, right? For putting in, I think, wells. Those things are located within either the datum of NAD 83 currently, or the state plane coordinate representation of that datum. So pretty much, any map that you look at, somebody has tied to the data one way or another. And so there's a huge host. Obviously, the most fervent users are the surveyors, engineers, people developing GIS products, and that's it. Town governments, obviously, through their tax maps or flood insurance surveys on the vertical side, especially. Construction layout, precision agriculture. So here's one that even in Vermont, I was surprised many years ago. I worked directly in Vermont along with the state Vermont Agency of Transportation. We have here in Vermont, you have a real-time GPS network that's out there. And I got a call in the early summer, late spring, from someone up in Franklin County who was very upset that he couldn't plant his corn. I'm not keeping you from planting your corn. He says, but I can't access the GPS receiver that's pushing out those coordinates. I can't plant my corn if I can't use the machine control for it. So there's a lot of implications to these systems, and a lot of non-conventional users, I guess, of those coordinate systems.
My question was going to be is how does all that stuff get notified? Is there a central computer someplace that says, okay, here it is?
So for land surveyors and obviously they need the knowledge in their head, but for anybody who's using the technology, NGS, we work very closely with all the manufacturers, the software developers. So when this rolls out, they'll already have updates and patches for everybody's software, so they can just be applied. Because the farmer doesn't know datums. All right, doesn't care. All he wants to do is plant his corn.
He wants to turn his machine on.
That's it.
He wants his machine to recognize.
Right. So John Deere. So we talk to John Deere, and John Deere makes sure that farmer can do it.
You gotta talk to the truckers to get their trucks so they don't get stuck.
Oh, they're still gonna go. They're still gonna go over the notch. It doesn't matter.
Okay.
But I think that's everything that I had. I appreciate your questions and attention. I'm happy to address any more.
What will this cost, if anything, the average Vermonter bill?
Well, I won't say directly. It's hard to say. Obviously, some time is going to have to be spent by state agencies in order to implement this, changing documents, changing their operating procedures, their standards or scopes of work, any of that stuff. So there's going to be some nominal.
Inherent though with.
It happens anyway, right?
Keeping current the work.
Oh, sure, yeah, those things have to stay up to. I mean, there may be some additional minimal cost. I mean, I can't say what that number is, but it's not like a whole new program or something where there's going to be a huge tax implications. It's just part of the cost of doing business, I think.
Tim Taylor, BCGI, as Dan was saying a moment ago, a lot of this is handled in the softwares or the tool sets that the various practitioners are using. A lot of it's going to be in knowing to specify from what to what once the new thing is available. So sometimes it's as easy as that once it exists.
There will be questions that we'll need to deal with, like, should we re-project all of our historic aerial imagery, for example, and we'll work with our users to understand whether or not, how much value there is them and us doing that. They can pull it in and re-project it on the fly. It's probably a lot easier to do now than the prior change in the early 80s, but those are some of the details where, you know, this undoubtedly will give us some headaches at some point, but we'll work through it.
Yeah, I think, you know, the biggest I hate to say the word cost, frustration for people is that learning curve going from one to the next, and that one time doing something that they should have done differently because of the new system, and it's, you know, one of those mistakes you make one time and then you don't make that again, hopefully. So it's but yeah, monetarily I see little cost, but I can't speak for the state.
Moving forward, like, for example, if we issue a contract for new imagery, we would simply reference the new data's new coordinate system, and they would put that in, and really there's no real cost involved. It's mostly how you calibrate your processes.
Does this have anything to change, like Greenwich Mean Time? You know, does that have any?
No.
No, it doesn't have an impact. Okay.
So who wrote the language? Was it you as the consulting, or did you guys wrote the language?
Dan has a template, well, NGS has a template text that we adopted, VCGI adopted for Vermont purposes.
Okay.
And then made it Vermontese, or made it look very much like the older language.
Yeah, some of the key take-homes with the Vermont coordinate system as proposed in the language of the bill are shifting from explicit reference to what the state plane coordinate system is in the statute to deferral entirely to NGS.
A perfect example is if you look at how North American, the state plane coordinate system 83 is described. It says exactly what the value of the false easting is.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, let's say in 5 years, for some reason, somebody has a real reason to change that number. You can change that number. NGS can document that number, but you don't have to go through and reestablish new legislation to support that.
But we have some stuff in here about like the definition or the translation between meters and feet and stuff like that, because we didn't have that before, or we just needed it here.
It was there.
It was there. What happened was at the federal level, at the end of 2022, what's known as the US survey foot was noted as deprecated, meaning it still exists, but it's advised not to be in use. So the current statute is actually out of date relative to federal practice, which is don't use the survey foot.
Use the international foot.
Use the international foot, which is different ever so slightly, but over long distances, it adds up. So part of the bill also does reflect that change. It's now been made federal.
Okay. All right.
I think you're the reporter.
Are there any other questions for Mr. Martin?
No, it's just kind of cool.
Yeah.
And it really, it's straightforward. It's something that we need to do. And I guess if we use that language, then this is the last time the legislature conceivably will have to deal with it.
At least for a very long time. Yeah.
Cross my fingers.
Just a long time. Yeah.
But we have our ledge counsel here, Tucker, I had one question for you. I don't know if you want to come up to the seat. Maybe that'd be better.
And I could just add, we did, there's one very minor edit that we did send along to Tucker that we made in the final page regarding the transition, just to be clearer as to when it will take effect.
On the effective, not on the effective date in the transition section. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, you can introduce yourself.
Sure. Good morning, Tucker Anderson, Legislative Counsel.
So my question, as much as the question the main question we've had on this bill is kind of why do we need to make the change in the statute, and is the language, can you point us to the language in the bill where it makes it so we don't have to do this again, where we're referring to how these changes could be done in the future so we don't have to have a statutory change every time?
So
Or is that what it does? That's my understanding is one of the things it does. If that question makes sense.
Your question
He
makes,
doesn't do it by the looks.
your question makes sense. The construct here, and I believe that, I didn't hear the testimony earlier, but I believe that what you're getting at is in section 673 under the additional definitions, it states expressly that the Vermont State Plane Coordinate System is the most recent system of plane coordinates established by the National Geodetic Survey. So it's defined as whatever the most updated version of the NGS standards are. So this definition is going to change in its meaning as new systems are developed in the future.
As new systems are developed, we don't have to keep going back and making statutory changes.
Correct, because it is now linked to whatever those.
We did have to do that in the definition 671.
The way that the bill is drafted currently is so that all of those preceding sections conform to these additional definitions in 673. A level of clarity could certainly be added to the bill. I know one of the questions you had when I came in last time, I think Anthea had actually kind of helped you work through the bill because I was in another committee.
Yeah.
I know one of the questions was, is there an administrative agency or legislative body outside of the General Assembly that could be delegated the authority to adopt new standards? And I didn't at the time have a comfortable response for whether the Center for Geographic Information had some sort of supervising legislative body that could adopt rules, for example, or if it was sufficient to provide Administrative Procedures Act guideline and procedure authority to the agency so that they wouldn't have to go through formal rulemaking process. I still don't know whether that's something that administrative agency would want to take on for these purposes, but that would be another way to delegate this away from the General Assembly and allow an executive branch agency to update this if necessary.
Administrative agency is Agency of Digital Services. So we did clarify that.
But if the national survey changes because of 673, the Vermont system would change.
Yes,
There wouldn't
the
be
definition of the terms used in Vermont statutes would automatically change.
And I don't see requiring rulemaking to defer to federal, it's not, our intent is to conform, and that's in the statute, so.
Okay.
I do want to address what John brought up earlier, the 2022 or title change for some of these definitions. John highlighted that there's some ambiguity in that section with what the state plane coordinate system is referring to, because that term is used in several different contexts in the bill to refer simultaneously to the standards that are being adopted by NGS and to the definitions in statute for Vermont's purposes. That is something that the committee should consider, is clarifying, at least in that last section, that this is specific to the 2022 standards. And I can, if that's something the committee wants to address, I can prepare an amendment that clarifies this is the 2022 system.
Instead of the 83 system, or that's
Instead of-
already some changes. This is the 679.
So the proposed changes in 679 specifically would be in lines 5 and 6 to changing it to the 2022 Vermont State Plane Coordinate System. 2022 would come in after
Vermont State.
Yes.
Okay. Well, if you could draft that for us, that would be great.
Absolutely.
So, can we is there a way for us to put that on the screen, Megan? Am I doing that?
No.
That would be the quickest way, I think, for Megan to do it, right? Or, which is just go to S154.
Internet on your committee page or whatever, yeah.
Yeah, if you go to S154 and go to page 6, we can just see it, because then we can, my hope if the committee is comfortable is just to vote this bill out today. So we could vote it with the understanding of what this change would be. Unless you want to share your screen, Tucker. don't know what's easier.
I have it.
We want to be as introduced. Oh, she can bring it up.
Sometimes Anthea would just do it on the screen and then we could see.
Yeah, I think we'll just,
But if we're doing it this way.
This one is what you want?
yeah, page 6.
That,
You can make it a little bigger. Zoom in with that plus there. Thank you.
I guess.
Great.
Yeah,
So do you want to explain why we're looking at the words again, Tucker, where you put you're just putting in the word, you're putting the numbers 2022.
Right, and this is for purposes of when this is gonna be effective immediately, and that is, oop,
Sorry.
that's okay. We're actually gonna put it here, release of the Vermont State Plane Coordinate System 2022 by NGS, at least in the recommendations that I received.
Okay, John, is that what you're saying?
Yes, you would on line 4 strike Vermont and then add 2022 after state plane coordinate system. That is what NGS refers to, what they will be adopting. So there will be a clear point in time when NGS adopts the state plane coordinate system 2022.
We don't need to have Vermont because it's.
That adds to the confusion, becomes self-referential.
Right, okay.
And the suggestion is also to strike this last part, 'cause
with Vermont State Plane
it
Coordinator.
would not be necessary anymore.
Okay.
Not just Vermont, but that whole.
That whole
clause.
last clause, yes. All with that from line 5 through line 7.
Okay, you don't need the old statute either. So it's striking the word Vermont, adding 2022, and then striking that second half of the
So,
clause.
so it's a 2022 plane coordinate system by
Then
National
yes,
Yes,
Survey, then get rid of it,
period.
period. And that whole thing, Soul system, et cetera, is gone.
Yeah, that whole, where it says will be the sole system,
That's
that's
gone.
not needed.
Anything after the semicolon's gone.
That is correct. The semicolon will also be gone.
And replace
Add
the
to-
period.
Well, the period stays. We have a policy of recycling existing periods.
I would hope
Any
so.
policy?
I would hope so.
Create a new one.
So, well, if the clerk's ready, I'll move the bill favorably as, no, we're not amending, we're just, whatever, number that would be,
Would
at the beginning.
you call that a 1.1 or what?
Yeah, we gotta give me a version.
It will be draft 1.1.
Draft 1.1.
Draft. Oh, right here, draft 1.1.
And with my motion, I would, also move that Senator Bertschlik report this baby.
Yeah,
Hardy and Watson are gonna ask a bunch of questions.
No, even the sponsor acknowledged that it was quite technical.
just give me a minute. Ruth Hardy's a sponsor, right? There's a Senator Hardy. Senator Hardy.
the prime. I do have a question on when we put in statute, like how many decimal points we're going out to convert feet to international feet to meters.
Mhm.
Is there a reason why it's out 9 and not 10 or 8?
It's reflecting exactly the standards as written at the federal level from their,
Okay.
pulled from their table.
So they picked 9 decimal points.
Yeah,
It's sort of like NIST, we're
it's
into a whole.
from this
other-
table. It is from this table.
Oh, it isn't?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Wow, see, everything comes
Everything
back
is
to
back to
NIST.
NIST. Change the committee to.
We didn't even know what NIST was
Yeah.
for a few years, and now we even have a photograph, don't we, of Senator
Yeah,
Ashby
we have that.
sitting in the
Members went to
NIST
go.
office in Colorado.
Next time I'm in Colorado, I get to
Yeah, would you please?
go. I'll report back.
Okay.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second. And so I'm gonna call the roll, and I'm gonna start out with Senator Chidden,
Aye.
Senator Kitchell,
Yes.
I'm an aye, Senator Perchlik,
Aye.
and Senator Mazza.
Did we lose him?
Is he still on?
No.
Did we bounce him?
Can I stop sharing for a second?
Sure, yeah, we don't need to share.
Oh, he's gone.
He's gone.
Oh, well, we can just say, what is it, absent?
Yeah.
Yeah, absent. I'll
I
just
don't
put
know
an
what-
A right
So
here.
it's 401.
401. And, motion carries.
Thank you, clerk. Counselor Zucker, is there anything else that we need from you, or do you wanna?
I need a copy of the new draft bill.
And then Andy's gotta take it off as a reporter,
Yeah,
once. We-
right, so you're gonna need a new copy of that draft bill. You're gonna attach it to that.
Okay.
I don't know if we have to do that, we just have to.
I can't remember. It seems to me it changes every time. I'm sure it doesn't.
They have a new sheet that
I'd
the
rather-
reporter signs with a
Right.
vote.
I'd rather bring too much and then have to go,
Yeah, go from back.
we have to go
Have to
back.
go back and forth.
Will you, have a page send me a copy, or what's the best way to do that?
Once it's been edited, I'm working on it right now.
Yeah,
I will send a copy to the committee and to Megan, and
Okay.
if you want a paper copy, we can get you a pink
Oh,
copy.
you need a paper.
Yeah, we need paper copies to take to the
To
Senate.
take to the Senate? Okay, I'll post haste. I'll do it.
Give the page something to do.
Yeah.
Yeah. They get bored out
I really do need
Right.
to.
there. We should have a shoveling snow.
Either that or they should monitor committees and have experience in terms of discussion or testimony. I
Right.
mean, this would have been fascinating, I would think, for maybe some students. Maybe.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you all.
All right, we can adjourn for the day. We think we succeeded.
Oh, we did.
We passed the bill and we sort of passed the child seat. I mean, we didn't pass it, but we agreed on it. So we can go
As long as they agree.